Okay, so these are going to be your second set of notes in product of power rule. And for these notes, there's actually going to be multiple steps like last time, but this time it's a little bit different set of steps. So before we had a lot of things to simplify in the parentheses, and then we distributed the exponent in. This time we have two sets of exponents that we're going to have to distribute into the parentheses before we can use the product rule. So we'll see what that looks like in a second. But notice how it almost looks like two different problems. So we have like this 3x squared all to the third, and this 2x to the fourth all squared. So I'm actually going to treat it at first like there's two different problems and just kind of cover this one here. So we're not really looking at it. So if I just have 3x squared to the third, all you're doing is distributing this 3 in to all of the exponents on the inside of the parentheses. So I did notice in your classwork, some of you, you were forgetting that this is not 3 times 3. This is keeping 3, and the new power on the 3 is to the third. And we're keeping the x and multiplying the 2 times 3. So 2 times 3 would be 6. So when we simplify it, we get 3x to the 6th. So now, if I go ahead and do the second part of this problem, I'm going to kind of like move this over to cover this part. Now we're just simplifying this part of the problem. So if I have the 2 on the outside, remember that's like distributing this 2 to all the exponents on the inside. So that first 2 is a coefficient. So we can just leave the 2 as the base, and the new exponent on it is the 2 from the outside. We'll keep the x, and then do 4 times 2 right here and get the 8. So basically now what we have is 3 cubed x to the 6th times 2 squared x to the 8th. And then I can kind of move this out of the way here because we don't really need it anymore. So we just simplified these separately. Now that we're here, we know how to simplify 3 cubed. 3 cubed is 3 times 3 times 3. So that's 27. X to the 6 can stay. 2 squared is actually going to be 4 times, or 2 times 2. And then we have x to the 8th. So this is where this gets a little bit more tricky, and that's why it's really important that you show your work and show all these steps here. We actually now can multiply 27 times 4. So when we do 27 times 4, we're going to get 108. And then now that we simplify the 27 times 4, we can simplify x6 and x to the 8th by keeping the x and putting the exponent as 6 plus 8, which is going to be 14. So this is actually our final answer here. And it did take a lot to simplify it. So remember, what we did was we first distributed all the exponents inside to their specific parenthesis. Then we simplified 3 cubed and 2 squared. We multiplied 27 times 4, kept the x, and add 6 plus 8. So again, there's a lot of steps there, but that's why I'm only giving you a few problems, so you can take your time on them and really show your work there. So example 2 is very similar. Notice how we have two different sets of parentheses, but there's an exponent outside this one. So we actually only have to simplify this one to start because there's nothing on the outside here. So in order to do that, again, if you look at this as its own problem, we just are distributing the 2 to the 5, the exponent of 2 to this x, and the exponent of 2 to this 4. So this is something you should be familiar with. Keeping the 5, putting the exponent of 2, keeping the x, doing 2 times 2 and making that 4, keeping the y and doing 4 times 2 and getting 8. So all I did here was distribute that 2 in. Now if you take a look at the second one here, this one actually doesn't have an exponent on the outside, so we're just going to leave it as x to the 4th, y cubed, because there's nothing to distribute in. So if we look now, again, 5 squared is a number with an exponent. So we do know what 5 squared is. 5 squared is 27. And if you want, you can just, it is 25. And then you can just rewrite x to the 4th, y to the 8th, x to the 4th, y to the 3rd. And then this just becomes now a product rule where we keep the 25 and we're adding similar bases. So remember, x to the 4th and x to the 4th can be simplified by adding 4 plus 4 and getting x to the 8th. And then we can also add y to the 8th and y to the 3rd. And we'll go ahead here and get y to the 11th. So this is our final answer here, completely simplified. So again, just to recap, we distributed this 2 in. That's how we got 5 squared x to the 4th y to the 8th. We just rewrote x to the 4th y cubed. Then, to simplify here, we just did 5 squared and made it 25, rewrote everything else, and our last step from here to here was to rewrite the 25, and then add the x's together and add our y's together. So that's how we get 25 x to the 8th, y to the 11th. So then our last example here is probably one of the most complicated ones that you'll see in this section. So it does take a little bit of time, but again, take your time, show your work with it. So if we look at it, without this y to the 5th, or 5y squared, this is actually like a problem that we did last week, where we simplified inside the parentheses and kept this 2 on the outside. So what that would look like is if I keep my parentheses with the squared on the outside, on the inside, we do 3 times 2. When we do 3 times 2, we get 6. Then we are adding the exponents on the x's, so keep the x, add the 4 plus the 5, and we get to the 9th. We keep the y, and then add the 3 and the 3 on the y, so we get y to the 6th. And that simplifies the inside of the first parenthesis, and we can actually go ahead and just copy down this part over here that we were ignoring at first. So I'm just kind of rewriting the times 5y squared. So this problem now looks like one of the ones above. So now that we simplify the inside of this parenthesis, we can distribute the 2 to all of the things inside. So 2 to the 6, 2 to the x, and 2 to the y. So that would be 6 squared. X to the 9 times 2 is 18. Y to the 2 times 6, which is 12, times 5y squared, because I'm just copying this down because it's not in the parentheses. So again, a lot of steps here. What we can simplify next is this 6 squared actually can just become 36, because 6 times 6 is 36. Copy everything else down. Then our next step is we can actually multiply 36 and 5. So when we do that, we're going to get 180. And then we can just combine our common bases. So there's actually only one x to the 18th. So we write x to the 18th. And there's 2 y's. There's a y to the 12th and y squared. So we can do 12 plus 2 and get 14. So again, there are a lot of steps to these problems, but the ones that you're going to see on the practice are just like this, so you can follow the video exactly, just with some different numbers. So the first thing we did was simplify inside the parentheses. So we turn this inside the parentheses into 6, x to the 6, y to the 6, or y to the x to the 9th, y to the 6th. Then we copy down this 5y squared. Then we distributed the 2 in, and that's how we got to this step. Then we simplified 6 squared to get to 36. Then we multiplied 36 times 5 and added all of our similar exponents. So again, these problems are kind of complicated, but you can follow them exactly when you're doing your classwork, and make sure that you are showing your work. Please feel free to email me if you have any questions.